let's talk about Greenland. It's the world's largest island, and on the surface, yeah, it's mostly a massive expanse of ice and rock. But for centuries, some of the world's biggest powers have seen something else entirely, something worth fighting over, and even trying to buy. So what is the secret of this icy giant?
Okay, let's start with a number that just sounds wrong. 57,000. That's it. That is the entire population of Greenland today. You could fit everyone in a small town's football stadium. Now picture that small town living in an area of over 2.1 million square kilometers. We're talking about a landmass the size of a small continent, with fewer people than you'd find at a single big concert. It's a mind-boggling paradox, right? And that paradox brings us to our central question. Why has this incredibly remote, sparsely populated island been so sought after by so many different players for so long? Well, to get to the bottom of it, we've got to go way back. Over 1,000 years ago, actually, with the island's first settlers and a pretty famous Viking you've probably heard of. Now, the Inuit people had been there for thousands of years, but the European part of the story really kicks off in 982 AD with a guy named Eric the Red. He gets himself exiled from Iceland, finds this new land, and, in what has to be one of the best marketing moves of all time, he calls it Greenland. Why? To make it sound appealing and attract more settlers. And you know what? For a few hundred years, it actually worked. But then, after almost 500 years, the Norse settlements just disappeared, vanished. This really eerie account from a ship that visited in 1540 is one of the last clues we have. The mystery of what happened to them, maybe a rapidly cooling climate, has kept historians guessing for centuries. Okay, let's jump way forward to the 20th century. This is where the reason for Greenland's importance becomes crystal clear. It was all about one thing: location, location, location. During World War II, Denmark was occupied by the Nazis, which meant Greenland suddenly became absolutely essential for the Allies. It was the perfect spot for bases to hunt German U-boats, it was a critical weather station for predicting conditions over Europe, and it basically controlled the key air and sea lanes in the North Atlantic. Then, during the Cold War, Greenland's strategic value went through the roof. I mean, just look at a globe. It's the perfect Arctic watchtower, sitting right on the shortest flight path for any missiles flying between the US and the Soviet Union. That made it the only place for an early warning radar system, which was centered at the now famous Thule Air Base. In fact, the US thought Greenland was so important that back in 1946, it offered Denmark $100 million in gold for the island. That's how critical it was to American security. But Denmark, they flat out refused to sell. And the stakes of this military presence were incredibly high. Get this, in 1968, an American B-52 bomber carrying 4 hydrogen bombs crashed near the base. There was a massive, frantic cleanup, but in all the chaos, one of those H-bombs was never found. It is still missing somewhere under the ice today. But it's so easy to forget that Greenland isn't just a giant strategic piece of ice on a chessboard. It's a homeland. And for the people who actually live there, the 20th century was also the story of their journey to find their own voice. For centuries, Greenland was a Danish colony, plain and simple. All the big decisions were made thousands of miles away in Copenhagen. But that experience of being semi-independent during World War II sparked a real desire for self-governance, which they finally got with Home Rule in 1979, giving Greenland its very own parliament. And Greenlanders have always been willing to forge their own path. In 1972, there was this defining moment where Denmark voted to join what we now call the EU. But Greenland, an overwhelming 70% of them voted no, mainly because they were worried about protecting their precious fishing waters from other countries. And that independence streak is as strong as ever. When the idea of the US buying the island popped up again recently, polls showed that a massive 85% of Greenlanders were completely against it. They see themselves as Greenlandic, not as a piece of property to be bought and sold. So, fast forward to today, and the game has changed again. The intense interest in Greenland is shifting. It's not just about its strategic location anymore. It's about the unbelievable treasure that's buried underneath all that ice. According to the U.S. Geological Survey, there could be as many as 17.5 billion barrels of undiscovered oil under Greenland's surface. And that's not even counting the huge reserves of natural gas. But the real prize, the thing that has
everyone's attention now, it's rare earth minerals. Look, these things are the absolute building blocks of our modern world. They're in your phone, they're in electric cars, and they're in the most advanced military tech on the planet. And here is the kicker. A recent EU survey confirmed that Greenland is basically sitting on a geological jackpot. It might hold 25 of the 34 minerals that are considered critical for industry and defense. The potential scale is just hard to wrap your head around. So why is this such a big deal? Well, because right now, the global supply of these super important minerals is dominated by one country, China. They control about 70% of the market. And that gives Beijing an incredible amount of economic and strategic power. So, this sets up the modern dilemma, right? Is this new cold rush for Greenland about the old fear of military threats from Russia? Or is it about a new kind of competition for economic security, about breaking China's chokehold on the resources that will power the future? And all of this brings us to Greenland's next chapter, where all these powerful forces are crashing together. Its strategic location, its people's desire for independence, and this incredible, untapped natural wealth. You've got all these things shaping what happens next. There's a really strong push for full independence, and it's fueled by the idea of those riches under the ground. At the exact same time, the ice is literally melting, which is opening up new shipping lanes and making it easier to get to those resources, which, of course, only makes global powers like the US and China even more interested. So that leaves us with the final, huge question. In a world where the Arctic is changing faster than ever, will Greenlanders get to forge their own path and become an independent resource powerhouse? Or will they just end up as a critical piece on someone else's global chessboard, controlled by outside forces? One thing's for sure. The next chapter for this hot property is just getting started.